But yeah, Cyberpunk. I mean, I think it's the science fiction of now.
Yeah.
It's funny because I think in the 80s...
It is. It's very relevant to now.
Yeah.
It always is some movies you can see reflections of now in that future, like when you watch a Star Trek or you watch a movie or another different sci-fi.
Yeah, little bits, right?
But you always get it. Like when I watch Blade Runner, even when I watch the new one, I watch this movie or watch Ghost in the Shell or even Akira, you see now, there's still like an element of humanity that's just, this is how we live now, but so yeah, I get that. That's pretty cool. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, one interesting thing is that, like as someone who, and I don't know if I'll always make cyberpunk movies. I think I'll want to branch out and not do that all the time. Yeah. But one thing that's interesting is that, and I could be wrong about this because you're always going back through history and trying to find that origin point for everything. And in my opinion, the first cyberpunk movie is actually a Jean-Luc Godard film called Alphaville. Yeah, and one of my favorite films that maybe you could call it cyberpunk, maybe not, is George Lucas's THX 1138. One of my biggest influences. I love that movie. So if you watch that and then you watch Alphaville, you're like, oh my god, George is doing a lot of these Jean-Luc Godard things, and it's very, very much. It's got a detective.
Okay.
It's got this future with androids. It's very much like, it doesn't have obviously that 80s aesthetic that came from Blade Runner or Neuromancer, but it's like, oh wow, he was doing it already.
Already,
yeah. He saw it. Yeah, it's great.
There's so much to talk about.
Yeah, and that was in the 60s. So I think that's what's poignant about it.
When you say that, like, when you're saying, like, at some point you want to branch out and, past couple films that you've done have been cyberpunk, or kind of in that genre, sci-fi. One thing I would say I commend about what I've seen from you, even when I first met you, I've met a lot of people who say I'm doing a movie. I'm doing it, and I've met even a lot of people through college or wherever, I'm doing a movie in sci-fi, and the first thing you always think is low budget. How are you going to pull that off? And I will say, with watching Anamnesis, you definitely feel you can feel Brad's inspirations. You can, that Blade Runner, the different movies that you've watched, and you can feel like through the way you shoot and the way you pace, and even just the way you capture a sense of sci-fi in the world without needing to go. There's like in Anamnesis, there's no green screen. But from the time you show the first like neural gadget that captures the dreams or whatever it does, you can probably explain that better. You're just like, oh wow, there's like thought put into this.
Yeah, and I actually brought a couple of props.
That's cool.
Yeah. So here's
look at this.
This is the pen device. This pulls the memories, and then
what I can actually do is take some pictures of these, and we can put them up.
And then this is so if you watch the film, this is what Fix puts on the girl's head.
Puts on her hand. Yeah, on her hand when she's on the one.
Immobilizes her.
So look at this. If I was wearing this, and this, what does this do? This captures my.
Yeah. So this would pull your memories through your eye. Yeah.
And that, bro, so here's the thing. We're not that. I don't know if you've read there's an article. I listened to it was like on NPR one day. They were talking about there's scientists working on capturing actual memories through the eye, because everything that we see, like there's a reflection, it gets stored on the back, and they've been able to get it to the point where it's like kind of like fuzzy images. But can you imagine, we're getting fuzzy images now? Then we're gonna get like crystal clear, high def ones
through an eyeball.
We're recording everything, and so they've been able. There's a point in your brain where it stores those memories. So I think they were. What is it? I'm just probably like botching this all up, but they were able to. They're basically saying that they'll basically be able to eventually go in. Like, let's say something happened, there was a shooting or whatever, and you were an eyewitness. They could go in there,
eyewitness,
and pull out, and pull out what you saw. Like, if you could tell if you were lying or kind of get more of an accurate.
It's funny that to me that speaks to cyberpunk, which is the idea of like, in one way, it makes justice more perfect, right?
Yeah.
Because one of the things about our justice system is that it is imperfect. It's like, can you really tell what someone did by DNA evidence, all this stuff? So it's that middle line of like, we should do it because justice will be better. But then it's like, isn't it an intrusion? What's that?
Are you a Minority Report fan?
Oh, yeah.
That's a strong one.
Yeah,
I thought I would
definitely.
We're deal with that. So.
Yeah. So to me, I'd say probably the props here are sort of like an example of this. My core philosophy with making the films that I do at this level, because I still have a day job. I'm not, working for the industry,
Right.
but I love it so much that I just keep doing it. So one thing that I got from Star Wars that I thought we should take this philosophy into the films that we do at this level because we don't have that much money.
Yeah.
And it's the whole idea of kit bashing. So, like the Millennium Falcon, the Star Destroyer, it's all model kits put together. And so, and really the philosophy behind that, and like the dogfights and all that stuff, and the helmets and everything, was find something analogous in real life, base it on that. Like Darth Vader's helmet looks like a samurai helmet, that kind of thing.
It totally does.
It feels, and Han Solo is essentially a gunslinger, right?
Yeah.
Now, George was smart enough to abstract those things so far that you might not even realize that. Like when I was a kid, I wasn't like, it's a samurai helmet.
Right.
But so what it does is it grounds it in this reality that you can kind of, in your human collective subconscious, there's an authenticity to it.
There's a subconsciousness to you that's relating and going, that guy's...
And it's and this is what sci-fi did wrong all the time before this film, before Star Wars, was it would just make things up out of whole cloth. Like the planet Zorg. And it's like, well, Alderaan's a much better name. It sounds like something that someone could actually name something, right?
Yes.
Right? Okay. So basically...
You're not a fan of the new Star Wars movies, right?
No, I hate them. But my point is that...
No, I hate them.
I take
Interlink.
So anyway, I take that philosophy into all aspects of filmmaking. So for me, the costumes. Yeah. We go out to Goodwill, Jet Rag. We find costumes there. We cobble them together. The world, like if you watch Anamnesis, the world that it takes place in was we found what is pretty much a crack motel down in downtown Los Angeles.
I was like, I could tell when I was watching. I was like, where did you shoot this at?
And they let us completely production design the room. We were like screwing things into the wall. Wow. Yeah, and so basically the philosophy is use what you have around you and repurpose it. And basically what it does is it gives you this production design for very little money, but it has an authenticity to it and I think a character to it that you might not have if you try to come up with it whole cloth.
And that you get from Anamnesis. Definitely like when he's in the little like restaurant and there's like a neon sign in the back and it's like a neon sign on this real restaurant, but you go like you start to almost imagine what's off screen. And probably everything around him is probably neon.
And I think that's a good point because with the film that I'm shooting right now, Sprawl, and definitely to a greater extent in Sprawl, but I think Anamnesis too. Yeah. I'm always interested in the world as much as the people. Right. So in this, we can talk about this.
That speaks a lot to the original Blade Runner because I think there's more to be said. Maybe me, the way I feel, there's more to be said. I won't say that completely, but there's almost more to be said about the visual style of the movie than the substance of the story. It feels like that at first, but the more you revisit it, the more there's more to be said about the story. That's
this kind of goes into my whole philosophy, which is...
You want me to give this back?
Yeah, no, you can just set it down. And this is what... Okay, so people who are admittedly, let's say, movie buffs, right? Yeah. Might not understand that an aspect of... And this goes to writing a novel or a movie or whatever. There's story, and then there's character. Yes. And... sometimes you have a really, really strong narrative, or let's say a really complex narrative, but your characters aren't that interesting. Yeah. I think what gets overlooked about Blade Runner is that the characters are really complex and interesting. And so when I hear the criticism that the original Blade Runner is soft on story, or there's not much story there, I think there's the right amount of story for those characters. And I think that's what's strong about it. Right.
I agree.
And so when I think of Blade Runner,
character,
I think when you go back and you watch Blade Runner and you start to realize that it's a better film, and it's like a more relatable film, and you start to really get into it, it's not just the world, it's not just the music, it's not just the visuals, it's also these characters that are allowing you into that movie. Right. And I think the movies that I don't like as much, that are still well directed, still okay written, it's because the characters just don't really pull me into that film. They don't invite me. There's not much going on there. They are servicing a narrative. And when the characters service a narrative, what you start to realize about those movies, and this is why I don't like the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies or the new he's like the boogeyman to me. So the Force Awakens, the characters are servicing an A to B plot. I need this person to get here and do this. Why? Because
I can't disagree with that. I can't disagree with that. I actually hated like Rogue One, and people don't know why. I just don't like it. I didn't mind Force Awakens as much, and I do think that this new one looks good. But
what's funny about a lot of these movies, and we can get into this with Blade Runner 2049, is that I would say definitely.
We're getting there.
I would definitely say Blade Runner 20. I don't want to give J.J. Abrams too much credit. Because, trust me. But if there was anything I could say about The Force Awakens that I think makes it an enjoyable experience for people, I think it's this sort of sense of whimsy that he imbued in it, right?
Yeah. He does that very well.
Okay, so when I was in graphic design school, there was one thing that they tried to hammer into us, which was, let's say you're designing a logo.
Yeah.
This is at the time when really the computer was starting to take over as the core tool of graphic design, right? But what my teacher would tell me was, don't get your logo into the computer until it's ready. And the idea was that once you get it out of the realm of the pencil in your hand and working it and reworking it until it's right, really the computer is really just for rendering, right? It's not for the philosophy or the concept.
Right.
And their idea was, you're going to think it's more done than it is because it looks more perfect.
Right, and it's not done because
you just haven't worked
when you sketch it. If it looks wrong sketched, then it's probably not wrong.
Right, and this all goes to, and it's
that's
funny.
So interesting. That's interesting. That's a philosophy that doesn't. She can't teach that these days. If you think about this day, you probably no one teaches that way. I'm sure there's a few people, but you probably have it. The starting ground is within the computer, and what you're saying, what I'm feeling is almost makes you think that maybe there's things that we're almost like it's so easy to produce things now.
Yeah, the production value has never been better.
Yeah.
So I think the same way about, let's say the script, right, is you're sketching.
Yeah.
You can get the director 2049 to direct, let's say, the second draft of that script, and he's gonna imbue it with all this atmosphere, and he's gonna bring authenticity to the action and to the emotion, and it feels more done than that script actually is.
You could be right.
Because
here's the thing. I'm gonna put myself out there and I'm gonna say there's something that has always that you can get to me very easily through atmosphere.
Yeah.
And I'll be in it. I can feel the music and if I feel like it's synced right and the characters are doing their part, I'm in love. So almost to the point where like you can fall in love with the character development where some people be like, this is Lionel's story. Yeah. Some people really need a narrative. Like, why are the characters not doing anything? Yeah. Whereas you're like, they're doing a lot. They're actually, the characters is experiencing a lot, therefore doing a lot. I agree with you. I'm the same way where a lot of people were like, one person said Blade Runner 25 was as depth as it was in, one of my friends told me their friend said this movie was about as, deep as a pool of water. And it was pretty much Ryan Gosling walking everywhere.
Yeah.
You might even agree with that. But for me, there was so much in Ryan Gosling moving from place to place. There was so much that I was learning. There was so much in the world building that I felt like I feel like in any movie you're a fly on the wall. You want to be like the character, but a lot of times you're not really in it. You're still watching it. Yeah. That's what makes it different from like role playing or video game. But when you, just like in a novel, you're experiencing. That's what makes movies so strange in a way that like, so surreal that they can never be. Everybody's like, that movie wasn't realistic enough.
Right.
A movie can never be realistic.
Movies are like dreams.
It is a dream.
Yeah.
And for me to be able to experience this dream, that's why I guess maybe I love those movies that are almost more dreamlike, where the 2049 felt kind of surreal in its pacing, so that I felt like I was being drawn into this dream, and I felt like they were expanding on the world that I had seen in the first one. So,
well, I mean, what I would argue is that the first one is as much like a dream. I would say it's actually even more like a dream. It's even more so that you're getting pulled into moments that I remember I was talking to John Cahill, actually.
Okay, yeah.
We were at a party, I was talking to him, and we were actually, he doesn't like, at least, I don't want to speak for him, but at the time he had a problem with like the unicorn moment in Blade Runner, right? So
I have a slight problem with it.
It's funny though, because a friend of mine was right there listening to our conversation, and he had famously never seen it. And we were always trying, but he wanted to wait for the right moment. He was like, "I gotta see it on Blu-ray or on the big screen, right?" So he had never seen it, and Cahill was like, he said something like, "Yeah, but this version's good." And I was like, "Yeah, but there's no unicorn."
Right.
And my friend Jonathan was like, "Wait, what?" Because you're talking about this Cyberpunk movie, and he's like, "Wait a second, a unicorn? What are you talking about?"
Explain the unicorn. What is your take on the unicorn? I mean. I don't, because for me, it says something. It's kind of cool because if you think about it, most of the replicants that we're introduced to in Blade Runner 1 have memories. Mm-hmm. So first of all, you can't have a memory of a unicorn because there's no memory. Unicorns don't exist. Mm-hmm. So there's two ways to look at it. The way I look at it is either the fact that he has a memory of a unicorn definitely tells us that he's a replicant because there's no such thing as a unicorn, or he's actually dreamt of a unicorn because he's dreaming. Therefore, we've never had any replicants. I'm sure they can dream. I'm not saying they can't, but in terms of the movie's kind of philosophy, no other replicant dreams about something more. Because just dreaming about a unicorn for me is like a metaphor for wanting something else out of life, right. Which means that Deckard is that, like you were saying, you didn't like about 2049, where there's this kind of, the holy child, the kind of the miraculous birth. The miracle in Blade Runner for me, when I saw this before, I just felt like this when I watched the final cut. Yeah, that's a miracle that he is. Is he that replicant or is he human, or is he that replicant that is actually now dreaming? Okay, so I think that's a beautiful idea. Okay, and my version of what you're talking about goes off of that. Okay. Now, one thing is that I have very, very, very strong feelings about the idea that Deckard's a replicant. I hate that idea. Okay. You think he's human? Yeah. Okay. And yes, I think for him to be a replicant doesn't make sense, actually, even just logistically. Okay. And I think it undercuts the theme of the film. My favorite thing about the original Blade Runner is, and this goes to the whole idea of noir and sort of this like nihilistic look at humanity, right? And what I love about it is that Deckard's the human. Let's say ostensibly he's human. We're watching him, right? He's the human, and we're following him just like any protagonist. Right. We see the world through his eyes, right? What's interesting about him is that I start to get a sense as I'm watching that film and going through that movie that he's this lonely person, who, when he does make a connection to someone like Rachel, he destroys her world by telling her she's a replicant. He blunders his way into all his interactions with people. Right. He's almost more of a replicant than the replicants are. But what I love, that point isn't as poignant if he's actually human. Because Roy has these familial relationships. He cares about the other replicants. And what's interesting about those two people is that Roy's the villain because he hurts people, right? Right. He's the villain because he's... Outside of that, he's really just the villain because the good guys try to catch him. But he's willing to hurt people because he wants to live. Right. And which is a normal human reaction. And he cares about the people around him. He cares about the people. Deckard is a company man. Yeah. Deckard's like, all right, I gotta go do this thing. And he does it. And he's lonely. And he has these moments where he regrets things. But his connections with other people, even when he has sex with Rachel, he essentially forces her into it. Yeah. His interactions with people are almost as villainous as Roy. And so to me, the irony is lost if they're both replicants. That irony and that idea that humans could make something and produce something from our imaginations that takes on such a life of its own, that they become more human than we do. More human than human is the motto of the Tyrell Corporation. And so to me, this gimmicky idea that Deckard's a replicant just completely undercuts that entire through line.
And the reason that to me, it's kind of along the lines that you were saying, but I go in the other direction. To me, the idea of the unicorn dream, or that whatever you want to call it, a memory, that inspiration that he has in that moment, and what's interesting about it is that when you really get into his eyes in that moment, he's sort of staring off, and he has this blank look on his face, as if he's sort of losing his mind. It's this idea of like, when Roy, at the end of the movie, when Roy talks about all the amazing things he's seen, this is where I think the movie goes in the other direction, right?
Okay.
So Roy talks about all the amazing things he's seen, but they're just things that he's seen.
Right.
Deckard can imagine things that don't exist.
Yeah.
So the movie's making these points and counterpoints.
See,
about,
we're kind of like, I agree.
It's saying like, oh, the replicant is maybe a better person than the human, but then the human can imagine things that the replicant can only see. There's this back and forth that I think is really important. And I think to me, that's what the unicorn represents.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
I like it. And like, you're one of the few people that like have given me something that made me go, damn it. See, I would bring Brad on the show to just stump me every time.
No, you stump me too, man.
I don't know where I want to go with that. I'm like, you're right. So like I said, that's awesome. And like I said, that's just what I love about this movie is it opens up the kind of it allows you to have questions and to talk them out with people. Like when we finished with 49, okay, with my friends at work, we went and saw Guardians of the Galaxy, and when we came out, we were talking about the conversation. I just stopped and listened to the conversation that people were having. Yeah. The conversation was this like the comic book? Was that, I like that they did this, and that was really cool, and this colorful moment in that. When we came out 24/9, whether you hate it or not, we were talking about these kind of things.
Yeah.
We weren't talking about the story, we were talking about how it related to us, and like just there's stuff that's happened to us, and I was like, movies that just make you pose questions are awesome. So I guess to just digress and get back to what you were saying is, yes, I think when I hear, even though maybe not even, that wasn't my thinking, I'm like, damn, you kind of hit the nail on the head. If he was human, then that's perfect reason why he should be human. Now, do we argue? We know Ridley Scott as much as he can be a destroyer of worlds in a sword. I look at
especially when he goes
when he's
back
done with
to
the
things,
Alien franchise. God, that's a whole nother.
Yeah.
The Alien is my Blade Runner.
Yeah.
And Ridley Scott has really just, I'm trying to stick with him. He's like my George Lucas. I'm like, come on, Ridley, can you stop?
Yeah.
But I've told people like the last Alien Covenant was like, it was a decent Prometheus. And so here's the thing. First movie of its kind. This is what I will give Alien before we go back to Alien Covenant was a strong sequel, but a terrible prequel to Alien.
Okay.
That's what I've been telling people. I was like, it's not a bad Prometheus sequel.
Yeah.
But it's a terrible prequel to Alien. But I've never seen a movie that was both a sequel and a prequel at the same time.
Right.
And does certain things well. So going back, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think for me, when I watch Blade Runner, what I like to see in it is that maybe it doesn't matter who's human and who's not. And I think your argument makes it more powerful that he is a human because it makes us still slightly above the replicant.
Yeah, and I think, a movie that can make a point and a counterpoint as if it's arguing with itself is more interesting.
Yes, absolutely. Because when I watch it, sometimes I see it as, but when he's telling him at the end, I think what I've always gotten is that as Deckard's looking at the guy in the rain, for me, his eyes are saying, fuck, this doesn't really matter. And also making him realize that, like, in a strange way, why he wants to get back to Rachel so much, because she is real to him. Yeah. And that's all that matters. Right. Which also speaks to me about, like, Gosling's character, because joy is all that matters, whether she's fake or not. Right. He's no longer going to ask the question, is she real?
Which, again,
he's just going to make her real for
That's
himself.
why that should have been the whole movie.
Yeah, you're right. But so, yeah, that and... But if I had to argue him being a replicant, it still makes sense that he could be, because I don't know. I guess I do see the power in him not being, but also I see the power in him being a replicant, because if he is, then it speaks more to the replicants coming awake. It makes them less of a robot that is just doing human things. It's less about humans, like you said, imagining something greater than themselves. Well, they're not. They're just literally just recreating themselves. Right. If I was to create, if you make a baby in a test tube, if you use all the same parts, sperm and an egg, it's still a human. Yeah. We've used technology, but still a human. If I create a human, if I make a human from all the same DNA parts just because it didn't come from those two things, is it still a human?
Right,
it's still a human.
Yeah.
And I think the big question is like, the big thing that's answered for me when I watch that movie is these are humans, and it starts to become that question about how we see things in our society. Is that we can go, this person is this because they're dark skinned, this person is this because they're that, this person is this because they typically their culture smart, and I think it's about those different stereotypes, and so you start to look at Deckard, and maybe we don't know much about his background, we don't know much about where he comes from, so he sometimes doesn't even seem like he knows. Almost like the whole whimsicalness about him, that kind of like that lost nature. He doesn't seem like the hero. Somebody said like they hated the movie. I read an article where
the original or the new one?
The original. Somebody was like they hated it because like he's hunting all these replicants and he almost gets killed by them several times and he rarely fires his gun. He's not a badass in the movie. You're right. No. He's not a badass at all.
No, I say this all the time. My favorite thing about one of my favorite things about his character in that movie is that the performance that I think is closest. The Harrison Ford performance that I think is closest to his performance in that movie is not Indiana Jones or Han Solo. It's specifically, he reminds me of his character in Working Girl.
Whoa.
The Melanie Griffith movie. Yeah. Harrison Ford,
okay.
I love him in that movie.
Okay, I have to watch it
He's
now.
like a male bimbo, but he's super well-meaning.
Yeah.
He's just an idiot. And he kind of like, things kind of happen around him, and he responds more slowly than other people do. That's what I love about his performance.
He's very lost all the time in Blade Runner 1.
And that's why, I don't think Harrison Ford was playing the same character in 2049.
I guess that part of me when I was watching Blade Runner 2049 is I wouldn't expect him to be as lost. I wouldn't expect him to be as dumb because he'd have to come to a point of like he's learning a lot. We were talking about this earlier. Movie. He's learning a lot.
Right. But here's the thing. I feel very strongly that even if philosophically a person can change over time,
right?
How they see things, that mannerisms are really important. When you talk about a great Johnny Depp performance, right? Let's say Ed Wood.
Yeah.
You're talking about like the high pitched voice and the way he kind of shakes his head. Yeah. You're talking about mannerisms. They're very important. And the conversations that I've had so far with people are that those aren't that important, but I think it's actually kind of not giving enough credence to those things. Those things are very important. The way people talk, the way they react to things. Yeah, 30 years in the future, Deckard might be a little sharper.
Right.
But I challenge anyone to take a scene from the original and then 2049 and say that aside from the title Blade Runner and the fact that it's Harrison Ford, that he's playing the same person.
Has Harrison Ford ever been a great character actor though?
Yes. Yeah, watch Mosquito Coast. Okay. Watch Working Girl.
Okay. Maybe I'll take.
He actually can be a great. He's like Tom Cruise. Right. Tom Cruise can be a great character actor.
Right.
And he's done it.
But sometimes both Harrison Ford and Tom Cruise take a role and they show up and they play themselves.
I know, yeah. When Tom Cruise is in Mission Impossible 5, which I hated, he's basically just playing Tom Cruise, the movie star.
Right.
But when he's in Born on the 4th of July, Collateral, Magnolia, he's playing a character.
Even Mission Impossible 1.
Yeah.
He's so much Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
But here's the funny thing. He's also lost in this world. That's what I love about the first Mission Impossible. Yeah. He's not the badass
The
Tom
first
Cruise.
one is I can still watch it over and over again.
When shit happens, he's like, oh shit, I'm gonna roll with the punches. I'm about to throw this shit on the glass, and I'm about to chat. And then it's like, oh, Tom Cruise.
It's very Indiana Jones in that he's reacting to the situation, but he's getting the shit kicked out of him, and he doesn't know what's going on.
Everything after that, he goes into it like it's about to go down, and he's just slow motion,
It's funny because I don't think a lot of writers and actors and directors now are comfortable putting themselves in that position with characters, and it's a shame because I think Tom Cruise is the most in the first Mission Impossible. To your point, he's the most. It's the strongest version of that character, and one of the reasons is that he goes from scared and confused and terrified, and then the next scene. He's turning on the charm with Max. She takes the hood off him, and he's like, and he can do every emotion. Yeah. But then you get into these movies where, the later ones, where there's not really much going on with the character or the story. It's very surface level. It's almost like television. And he can't really do much.
Right,
He can't do all those Tom Cruise gears.
Right.
But I would argue that Harrison Ford is a great character actor.
And so I'll take that back. So you're right. Because that's what I've always looked at. Because I've even watched interviews where Harrison was just kind of, even when he like talks about when he did Star Wars, he was just kind of like the guy. He was like the guy's guy that just kind of got into acting. And
right, but the thing about Harrison Ford, this is really important. So when he was auditioning for Star Wars, right? So he didn't audition for Star Wars technically because he was in American Graffiti, and George was like, he was suggested as, why don't you bring Harrison in? And George was like, I don't want him to become my Robert De Niro and be in every movie I make.
Right.
But they were like, well, we need someone for these guys to read lines again. Why don't you just come in and do it?
I told you earlier, I was like, this shit doesn't work later.
Hilarious.
It's like as I get tipsy, like I'm just like trying to do the same stuff from the beginning. And
wait,
it's just
you
like,
a replicant?
Oh, are we all replicants?
But no,
wouldn't that be a crazy sci-fi that we're in the future and we're creating androids, right? We're now to the point where we're creating these new beings, and we're trying to like the whole argument is, should we be creating them because if they're sentient or not, all that stuff. But we don't know that. Like what you find out in the movie is that the human race died off a long time ago, and that we are the androids that took over.
There you go. That's cool.
actually,
that's like a Twilight Zone episode.
I stole it. It's actually a video game I recently just played, and it's not the same, of course, but it is very similar, and it is one of the best video games. That's why I feel like narratives, like when I find games like this, that it's called Nier Automata, and you play an android that's fighting robots on Earth, and you're constantly you're fighting for the humans, and you believe that the humans are on another planet. Yeah, the humans have actually died off, but fighting for the humans was the android's purpose.
So it just keeps doing its programming.
The androids at the top know that the humans are dead. Yeah. But they have to tell the androids that are fighting that the humans are still alive because that gives the androids purpose. Yeah. And it's a constantly interesting idea, and they look human, but they're not. And what's funny is these are androids that look human that are fighting robots that don't look human, and there's a war between them. They're the same thing, and what the androids end up finding out is that the robots that they're fighting are made from the same humans. Like they're all kind of the same, and like the androids feel different because they look different, because they're more like they're gods of the humans that made them, and the little like body robots that walk around. And so there's scenes that happen in the movie. There's like robot suicide, there's robots lamenting, and it's supposed to, some people saw it as like kind of funny because there's like these little like robots like, you know, committing suicide. But if you get to that point where you see what's happening, their awakening process, it's no different from the android that looks like a human. They just literally are all sentient because they were created by the same thing. They have the same process going on. Right. It gets amazing, but yeah.
So it's in a way, it's like we're all replicants, but we're all human at the same time.
Yeah, it's kind of that. And what's I don't know how we get on this, but it's so cool because the character you play, it's almost like it's from that same kind of like Japanese design as Metal Gear, the Metal Gear game. So like you have this like floating robot over your shoulder. Every android has one, and that records everything that's happening to you. It also helps you fight in combat. Yeah. Over the course, you and this other character, those two little robots start to become aware. It's very convoluted, and they start to talk to each other. So
that's like got a battle angel. That's
it's so and so at the end of the game, you both die. Both of the two main characters die, and I'm sure we're just botching this because you have to go play Nier Automata. But there's a point where to get through the entire story, you have to play several endings. Yeah. And every ending you get a credits. So when you get to one of the final endings, the credits roll backwards. Yeah. And so you hear, at some point as the credits are rolling, you hear the two AIs that were on the shoulders of the two characters that died, that were friends, say, you know what, this is not the ending we want. They start to compete with each other. Like, this is not what we want. And they were like, well, for us to fight against the system, we would have to dump all of our memory and we'd have to go toe-to-toe. You know, are you ready to do this? And they're like, well, you know, we're not going to live anyway. Why not? And so it asks you, do you want to fight back? Yeah. Do you want to fight the ending? Do you want to like fight against like the dying of the light? Yeah. And so and every time you've played this game, you've had like there's a Japanese, like you would love it, like the Japanese song plays and the girl singing and the credits are rolling, but now they're rolling backwards. So you start to, in the game, whenever you hack into a system, you're this little. It basically turns into like old school, like a shooter game where you're like a little triangle shooting. So you start fighting the credits. They're rolling against you. You're fighting the credits and you're blowing them apart. Yeah. Almost like you're trying to get back to the source so that you can restart the system. And it's so difficult. You just keep dying because the credits as they roll are shooting out blasts. Yeah. And as they gets down to a point where even like the CEO of like Square Enix, the people who made the game, the director, and the director's like the director's name is floating around and firing off blasts, and you're trying to kill it while this amazing song is playing. You keep dying, and every time you die, it's like, do you want to continue?
Yeah.
And if you keep continuing, you keep dying, and it's like, why don't you just give up? Isn't this all for naught? So around the like 10 or 15 time you've like lost on this, and you keep starting over, so it's getting annoying at this point.
Yeah.
It's like, do you want help? And so you say, yeah, I do want help. And so at some point when you ask for help, if you're logged in, only if you're logged in online, suddenly these other ships come in and start helping you. They like crowd around your little ship, and you start fighting the credits, and now you have like more firepower than you ever had. But you can see that they have names on them, like so-and-so Kawasawa, or like so-and-so Justin 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you start fighting, and you actually start beating the credits, and you work your way through. And the song even changes, and the lady's singing like in English and Japanese, and there's a choir of kids singing. It's so fucking epic.
Yeah.
And when you beat it, it goes to white, and then like you're able to like, it's almost like they start over, and they find the two characters lying next to each other, and they're like, well, we did it. They're gonna get another life.
Yeah.
And they're like, but won't they? Because the two characters start off loving each other, and they go through these arcs where they end up killing each other. Mm. They were like, well, won't the same thing happen? They were like, but the idea of us even having another chance means that they could. They may choose a different route.
Keep trying. Yeah.
And so it ends like that, and then when it ends, it says, do you want to help someone else? And then if you say yes, it says, are you sure? And then what you realize at the end of the game is that the person that helped you was another player who was at the same point trying to do the same thing. And it's literally another player's handle on PlayStation 4. Mm-hmm. And so that person helped you. When you say yes, that person helps you. But that person who helped you deleted all of the data on the game. They had to not be selfish and let the game delete their data to help someone else.
Whoa.
And so if you do this, so they ask you, do you want to live?
So you pass that on?
Do you want to pass that on? And you have to not be selfish, because if you're selfish, you stop there. You don't pass it on. But when you pass it on, it deletes the entire game. It deletes everything you experience, everything you want to share with maybe your friend. It gets rid of it.
It's kind of the Risk Legacy thing, where like it changes the board itself. Yeah, that's really cool.
So I went on a tangent of Nier Automata, not planning to talk about that,
really
but
cool.
playing Nier Automata. And there's even more cool things in it. But
well, I mean,